I remember the way she looked at me that first day, standing in our kitchen, sunlight cutting through the blinds, painting her hair gold. She smiled like we were old friends, her eyes warm and steady. But something in my stomach tightened, a quiet whisper I couldn't name back then. She was beautiful. That was the first thing everyone noticed. Tall, graceful, the kind of beauty that seemed to carry a secret in it. My mother introduced her as, "Your cousin Lily. She'll be staying with us for a while." But even then, something about the way my mother's voice trembled made me look up from my cereal. I was 22 at the time, living at home after finishing college, trying to figure out what came next. My mother, Caroline, had always been this strong, composed woman, the kind of person who could fix a broken drawer, calm a crying baby, and run a full-time job without ever raising her voice. But that day, as Lily walked into our lives, I noticed a nervous flutter in her hands. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that flicker of unease, was the start of everything. Lily moved into the guest room across from mine. She was quiet at first, polite in the way strangers are when they're trying to fit in. She helped Mom in the kitchen, folded laundry that wasn't hers, and always looked at my mother like she was searching for something, a signal, a memory, an answer. I caught her once in the hallway, standing outside Mom's room. The door was slightly open, and Lily's hand hovered near it like she wanted to knock but couldn't bring herself to. When she saw me, she startled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Oh, hey, sorry," she said. "I was just looking for the bathroom." But the bathroom was down the other hall. It didn't take long for my father, Mark, to start noticing too. At dinner, Lily and Mom would sometimes share these strange silences. Not awkward exactly, but charged, like they were both holding on to something the rest of us couldn't see. One night, I caught Dad watching them from across the table, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. "Everything okay?" I asked him quietly. He blinked, smiled, shook it off. "Yeah, sweetheart. Just long day." But his jaw was tight. And when he reached for his glass of water, his hand trembled just slightly. I told myself not to overthink it. After all, Lily was family. Mom had said she was Aunt Laura's daughter, and though I hadn't seen Aunt Laura in years, it wasn't impossible that she'd sent her daughter to stay with us for the summer. Families do that. People help people. But then, one afternoon, I overheard something that made me pause. I was walking down the hall toward the laundry room when I heard my mother's voice, low, trembling. "You can't just bring this up now, Lily. It's too late." Lily's voice followed, soft but firm. "Too late for you, maybe. Not for me," I froze. My heart started to race. The next moment, I heard footsteps. I ducked into the kitchen, pretending to search for a snack as they passed by. Lily's face was pale, her lips pressed together like she was swallowing a scream. Mom wouldn't even look at her. When the door closed behind them, I stood there staring at the counter, a bag of chips in my hand and my pulse pounding in my ears. Too late for what? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the ticking clock by my bed. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked. And then I heard it, the muffled sound of my mother crying. She almost never cried. I'd seen her hold herself together at funerals, through arguments, through years when my dad's business nearly went under. But now she was crying. And Lily? I couldn't shake the image of her eyes, that strange, almost desperate way she looked at Mom every time they were in the same room. Something wasn't right. And deep down, I think I already knew whatever secret they were hiding. It had been buried for years. And Lily had come to dig it up. The next morning, Mom acted as if nothing had happened. She made pancakes, humming softly, smiling at Dad like the night before had been erased. Lily, on the other hand, looked hollow, her eyes rimmed with red, her voice quieter than usual. She barely ate, pushing syrup around her plate. When she excused herself to go for a walk, I followed her out onto the porch. "Hey," I said gently, "you okay?" She looked at me. For a long time, she didn't answer. Then she gave a small, sad smile. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" She hesitated. "Family. How complicated it can be." I tried to laugh it off, but her words stayed with me. Family. Complicated. Too late. That night, when I looked at Lily's face across the dinner table, I couldn't unsee the resemblance anymore, not to Aunt Laura, but to someone else. Her eyes, her mouth, even the way she tilted her head when she listened. She didn't look like my cousin. She looked like my mother. That was the first real moment of doubt. And once it took root, it grew fast. In every gesture, every half-finished sentence, every flicker of emotion on my mother's face, I began to see cracks in the story she'd told. Something had been hidden in our family, something that had been waiting all these years to be uncovered. And Lily was the one who came to uncover it. Before everything began to unravel, life in our house had a rhythm: ordinary, predictable, safe. Our home sat on the edge of a quiet cul-de-sac in Charleston, South Carolina, with a white porch swing and rose bushes my mother tended like they were her children. Every morning smelled like coffee and toast, and every evening the sound of my father's car pulling into the driveway meant dinner was ready, and the world felt steady again. I'd graduated from college just a few months earlier, a degree in communications, no solid plan yet. I was back in my childhood room, the one with pale yellow walls and old photos taped to the mirror. I told myself it was temporary, just until I figured things out. Mom said she loved having me home, that the house felt full again, and for a while, it really did. Mom worked as a school administrator, and Dad owned a small construction company. He was tall, gruff in a loving way, with a laugh that could fill the room. They'd been married 25 years, not perfect, but solid. At least that's what I thought. Our days were simple. Mom woke early, made breakfast, called me sunshine when I stumbled into the kitchen with half-open eyes. Dad left for work with his travel mug, always kissing her on the cheek before he went. In the evenings, we'd sit around the dinner table, meatloaf, salad, maybe a bottle of red wine if it was Friday, and talk about our days. There was comfort in that routine, in the soft domestic noises, the hum of the dishwasher, the TV murmuring in the background, the faint smell of lavender detergent. We were normal. At least I believed we were. The day Lily arrived, I'd been painting my nails in the living room, half watching a rerun on TV. Mom came in, a nervous kind of smile on her face, saying someone special was coming to stay with us for a while. I didn't think much of it at first. Mom was always helping people. She'd taken in a coworker once who was going through a divorce. Even let one of my college friends crash at our house for a month when she couldn't afford rent. But when Lily stepped through the door, carrying a single worn suitcase, something about the air shifted. She hugged my mother, not like a niece would hug her aunt, but with this depth, like she was trying to remember what it felt like. Then she turned to me. "You must be Emma," she said softly. Her voice had a tremor, as if saying my name meant something heavy. "I've heard so much about you." I smiled politely. "Yeah, and you're Lily, right? Aunt Laura's daughter?" She nodded, but her eyes flicked toward Mom, just for a second. And I noticed my mother's hands tighten around the handles of the grocery bag she was holding. That evening, after Lily unpacked, I went to Mom's room. "So, Lily," I started, "when was the last time you saw Aunt Laura? I barely remember her." Mom froze for a second, then turned with that same composed smile she used whenever she was trying too hard to look calm. "Oh, years ago," she said. "You were just a kid. Laura's been through some rough patches. Lily needed a place to stay for a bit, that's all." Her tone was final, but her eyes darted away before she finished. Something about the way she said rough patches made me curious, but I didn't push. Mom had always been private about family matters. We weren't the kind of family that aired secrets. Or so I thought. The next few weeks passed in a quiet sort of adjustment. Lily slipped easily into our lives. She helped Mom in the kitchen, folded laundry while humming old songs, and always seemed eager to make herself useful. One Sunday morning, I found her in the garden, kneeling beside Mom, both of them pruning roses in the soft sunlight. They looked peaceful together, their movements almost mirrored like they'd done it 100 times before. I remember standing at the window, watching them, and thinking how strange it was, this sudden closeness. I'd never seen Mom warm up to someone that quickly. Not even me, sometimes. At dinner, Lily asked questions about my childhood. "What were you like as a kid, Emma?" she'd ask, smiling. Or, "What was your mom like when you were little?" Sometimes her tone was playful, other times searching, like she was studying every word. And when Mom was quiet, Lily would glance at her as if waiting for some hidden answer. One night, when Dad went upstairs to take a call, Lily asked, "Did your mom ever talk about her life before you were born?" I frowned. "Not really." "Why?" She hesitated, stirring her pasta. "No reason, just curious." Mom's fork clinked against her plate. Her face had gone pale. "Lily," she said softly, "how's your mother doing these days? You mentioned she wasn't well." The shift was immediate. Lily looked down, her shoulders stiff. "She passed away last year." The silence that followed was heavy. I looked at Mom. Her expression froze, her lips trembling just slightly before she pressed them together. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Lily nodded, blinking rapidly. For a second, it almost looked like Mom wanted to reach for her hand, but she didn't. After that, the conversation never recovered. Later that night, I sat on my bed scrolling through my phone when I heard soft voices down the hall. Mom's door was half closed again, light spilling through the crack. "You should have told me," Lily said, her voice low but urgent. Mom's reply was sharp, trembling. "And ruin everything? You think it was that simple?" Then silence. A long, aching silence. I wanted to walk away, but my feet wouldn't move. Something was happening, something deep, painful, buried long before I was old enough to see it. And no matter how much I told myself to stay out of it, I couldn't. Because whatever it was, it had my mother's name written all over it. That week, Mom started acting strange. She was quieter, distracted. She'd stop mid-sentence and stare at nothing for a moment before forcing a smile. Her coffee went cold in the mornings. Her hands shook when she folded laundry. Dad noticed too. "You all right, honey?" he asked one night as we cleared the dishes. "I'm fine," she said too quickly. But when she turned away, her eyes were glassy, like someone who was barely keeping it together. And Lily? She seemed to know exactly what was wrong. The way she looked at Mom, there was sympathy there, and something else, almost sorrow. And then one afternoon, while I was looking for an old photo album in the attic, I found something that changed everything. A box, dusty, tucked behind Christmas decorations. Inside, a stack of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, and on top of them, a birth certificate. The name on it wasn't mine. It was Lily Carter. Mother's name, Caroline Miller. Father, blank. I remember sitting there on the cold attic floor, heart pounding so loud it felt like thunder in my ears. The air felt thick. My hands trembled as I held that piece of paper, the edges soft from years of hiding. It didn't make sense. It couldn't be. But it was there, in black and white. My mother had another daughter, and her name was Lily. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed with that old birth certificate spread out in front of me, the name Caroline Miller glowing under the dim lamplight. I kept reading it over and over, tracing the edges with my thumb, as if the paper itself could explain how something like this had been kept from me for 22 years. It didn't. My mind was a storm of disbelief, confusion, and anger all swirling at once. I wanted to tell someone, my dad maybe, but a small frightened part of me knew I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I understood what it really meant. Because if Lily was my mother's daughter, then she wasn't my cousin, she was my sister. The next morning, I moved through the house like I was walking through someone else's life. Mom was at the stove making her usual scrambled eggs, her hair pulled back neatly, her expression calm, too calm. Lily sat at the table, scrolling on her phone. For a moment, I just stood there staring at them, the woman who had raised me and the woman I now knew was her secret child. The resemblance I'd tried to ignore was suddenly undeniable. The same chin, the same small scar above the eyebrow. It was all there. Mom looked up and smiled. "Morning, sweetheart. You look tired." "Couldn't sleep," I said softly, forcing a smile back. Her eyes lingered on me a second longer than usual. "Something on your mind?" I shook my head, sitting down across from Lily. "Just thinking." Lily smiled faintly, almost knowingly. "About what?" "Family," I said before I could stop myself. Mom's hand froze halfway to the coffee pot. For just a flicker of a second, her face went pale. Then she laughed lightly, too lightly. "You sound like me when I was your age. Always in my head." But I wasn't imagining things anymore. I could feel it, the lie pulsing between them, thick as smoke. Over the next few days, I started noticing everything. The way Mom avoided eye contact whenever Lily mentioned her childhood. The way Lily would sometimes look at old family photos on the mantel. Her thumb brushing over my mom's face like she was trying to memorize it. One evening, I found them sitting together on the back porch. Mom was crying quietly, her voice soft and broken. "I didn't mean to leave you," she said. You have to believe that, Lily's voice cracked. You didn't just leave, Caroline, you erased me. Caroline, not Mom. I froze in the hallway, my hand gripping the doorframe so hard it hurt. I couldn't hear the rest, my heartbeat drowned it out. That was all the proof I needed. I didn't confront her right away, I couldn't. I needed to understand the why. Why would she hide something like this? Why would she keep her own daughter's secret from her husband, from me? So I started digging. I waited until she left for work the next morning, then went through her things. Something I'd never done before. Her closet smelled like lavender and laundry soap. Everything was neatly folded, organized by color. But behind a stack of old sweaters, I found a box I'd never seen before, smaller than the one in the attic. Inside were photographs, a few of my mom younger, hair shorter, face softer, holding a baby. The baby had dark hair and round, curious eyes. On the back of one photo, written in faded ink, Lily, 1998. My throat tightened. That was the same year Mom and Dad got married. And suddenly, everything made a twisted kind of sense. That night, at dinner, I could barely swallow. Every laugh, every casual word between them felt like a lie. Dad talked about a project at work, completely unaware. Mom nodded, smiled, but her eyes kept drifting toward Lily. And Lily, she looked lost, like she didn't know where she belonged anymore. When Dad left to take a phone call, the silence that followed was sharp. Lily finally spoke. "You should tell her," she said quietly, looking straight at Mom. Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. "Not now." "When then?" Lily's voice trembled. "When she finds out from someone else?" I stared between them, my stomach twisting. "What are you two talking about?" I asked. Both of them froze. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it again. Lily looked down, her fingers gripping the edge of her chair. "Nothing, sweetheart," Mom said softly. "Just old family stuff. Old family stuff." I wanted to scream. Later that night, I went to Lily's room. The door was open just enough for me to see her sitting on the bed, staring at an old photograph, the same one I'd found in Mom's box. "You knew," I said quietly. She looked up, startled. "What?" "That she's your mother." Her lips parted, eyes wide, but she didn't deny it. Instead, tears welled up in her eyes, spilling over silently. "How long have you known?" I asked. "Since last year," she whispered. "When my mom, Laura, passed away, she told me everything before she died." "Everything?" She nodded. "Caroline had me when she was 19. Her parents made her give me up. Laura, her older sister, raised me as her own. I didn't even know the truth until I was 24. My heart was pounding. And you came here because? Because I wanted to know her," she said. Her voice broke. "To see the woman who couldn't keep me." The words hit like a knife. All the air seemed to leave the room. I couldn't look at her, not because I was angry, but because a part of me understood. Lily had been living a life that wasn't hers. And Mom, the woman who taught me right from wrong, had built her life on a lie. The next morning, I couldn't even look at Mom. She tried to talk to me, but every word that came out of her mouth felt like static. I could still hear Lily's voice in my head. I wanted to see the woman who couldn't keep me. At breakfast, Mom placed a plate of toast in front of me. "Emma, honey," she started, "we need to talk." "Do we?" I said flatly, not meeting her eyes. She sighed, her voice trembling. "Please. I know this is confusing." "Confusing?" I cut her off. "You lied to me my entire life, Mom." Her face went pale. Across the table, Lily sat frozen, tears already pooling in her eyes. Dad walked in just then, still buttoning his cuff. He looked between us, sensing the tension. "What's going on?" he asked. None of us spoke. Mom's hands were shaking. Lily looked away. And I knew this was it, the moment everything would finally come crashing down. Dad stood there in the doorway, his brow furrowed, looking between the three of us, his wife, his daughter, and the stranger who wasn't a stranger at all. "What's going on?" he asked again, his voice firmer this time. No one answered. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Then Lily stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the tile. "She deserves to know, Caroline," she said softly, but her voice was trembling. My mother's face crumpled. "Not like this," she whispered. "Please, not like this." "Like what?" Dad asked, his tone sharp now. "What are you two hiding?" My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I could barely breathe. Lily turned to me. Her eyes met mine, and in that instant, I knew what she was about to say. But I wasn't ready to hear it. "She's not my cousin," Lily said quietly. She's my sister. For a second, the room was silent. Completely silent. Then Dad laughed. This short, incredulous sound that didn't belong in that moment. What are you talking about? Mom pressed her hands to her face. Lily? No, she deserves the truth, Lily said, her voice breaking. I'm your daughter, Caroline. The one you gave up. Dad's face drained of color. Gave up? He repeated, his voice hollow. What does that mean? Mom looked at him, tears spilling down her cheeks. Mark, please. Let me explain. Explain what? He demanded. That you have another daughter you never told me about? His voice thundered through the kitchen. I flinched. Mom sobbed, shaking her head. It was before you, Mark. I was 19. My parents, they wouldn't let me keep her. They sent me away to stay with Laura for the summer, and when I came back, everyone pretended it never happened. Lily's hands were clenched at her sides. Everyone but me, she whispered. I lived that secret. Dad sank into a chair, staring blankly at the floor. And you just never told me? I wanted to, Mom said through tears. So many times. But I was terrified. What would you think of me? I thought if I could just move on, build a good life, maybe it wouldn't matter anymore. I felt my own tears burning. Didn't matter? I said softly. You lied to both of us. Mom turned toward me, her face pleading. Emma, I didn't lie to hurt you. But you did, I said. My voice shook, but I couldn't stop. You let me grow up believing I was your only child. You let me call Lily my cousin when all along I was your sister, Lily finished quietly. The words landed heavy in the air between us. Dad stood up slowly, gripping the edge of the table for balance. So all these years, you carried this secret, and you never thought I had the right to know. Mom's voice cracked. I was ashamed, Mark. I thought if I told you, you'd see me differently. I thought you'd leave. He shook his head, his voice low and bitter. I don't even know who you are right now. She reached for him, but he stepped back. The sound of her sob tore through the room. Lily looked away, guilt and pain flickering across her face. This isn't what I wanted, she whispered. I didn't come here to destroy anything. Then why did you come? I asked, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. She looked at me, eyes wet and shining. Because I needed to see her. To understand why she gave me away. Her voice cracked. I didn't come to hurt you, Emma. You have to believe that. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But in that moment, all I could feel was betrayal by both of them. The next few days were unbearable. Dad moved into the guest room. The sound of his suitcase zipping shut that first night felt like a door closing inside the house. Mom spent hours locked in her room. I'd hear her crying sometimes, muffled sobs that made my chest ache even when I didn't want it to. Lily tried to keep to herself. She cooked, cleaned, offered to leave more than once, but Mom wouldn't let her. Not again, I overheard her say one night. I can't lose you again. I stopped joining them for dinner. The clatter of dishes, the sound of their voices, it all felt wrong now. The home I'd known all my life had turned into a stranger's house overnight. One evening, Dad called me out to the porch. The sky was bruised purple with sunset, the air thick with humidity. He handed me a glass of iced tea and stared out across the yard for a long moment before speaking. You okay? He asked quietly. I shrugged. I don't know. He nodded slowly. Me neither. We sat in silence for a while. The cicadas were loud in the trees, their constant hum filling the space between us. Finally, he sighed. I loved your mother for 25 years. Thought I knew everything about her. He shook his head. Turns out I didn't even know half. She made a mistake, I said softly. He looked at me then, weary, heartbroken. We all make mistakes, Emma, but hiding them this long, that's not a mistake. That's a choice. His words stung because they were true. That night, I found Mom sitting alone at the kitchen table, a photo album open in front of her. Her fingers traced a picture of me as a baby, smiling in her arms. She looked up when I came in, her eyes red but calm. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said quietly. But I need you to understand I was scared. I didn't think anyone would understand what it was like back then. My parents sent me away, told me to forget her. I tried, but I never really did. Her voice trembled. And then I met your father, and you came along, and for the first time, I felt like maybe I could have a normal life. I swallowed hard. Was any of it real? Her eyes widened. Of course it was. You are my everything, Emma. Both of you are. Then why did you have to hide her? She looked down. Because every time I looked at Lily, I remembered the worst version of myself. The girl who wasn't brave enough to fight for her child. Her words broke something in me. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to scream. But sitting there, watching her shoulders shake, I saw not the woman who lied, but the young girl she used to be, terrified and alone, forced to make a choice no one should have to make. And still, it didn't erase the pain. The next morning, Lily was gone. Her room was empty, the bed neatly made, the suitcase gone. Mom found a letter on her pillow. She didn't read it out loud, but I saw her hands shaking as she opened it, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. Later, I found it crumpled in the trash. I hesitated before picking it up. It read, "I love you, Mom, but I don't belong here. I thought finding you would fill the hole I've carried all my life." Instead, it made me realize some wounds don't heal by being reopened. Take care of Emma. She's lucky to have had you all these years. That's enough for me. I stood there holding that letter, the words blurring through my tears. Mom had gotten her second chance and lost it all over again. Lily's departure left a silence that was somehow louder than her presence ever had been. Her absence filled every corner of the house, the faint scent of her perfume in the hallway, the mug she always used still sitting in the dish rack, the folded blanket she left on the couch. It felt like she'd only stepped out for a walk, and any second now, the door would creak open and she'd appear again. But the days kept passing and she didn't come back. Mom barely spoke for a week. She moved through the house like a ghost, her eyes swollen and distant. She stopped cooking, stopped answering the phone, stopped doing anything but sitting by the window as if waiting for Lily to reappear on the road. Dad, meanwhile, spent more time outside fixing things that didn't need fixing. The fence, the porch light, the gutter, anything to keep his hands busy, his mind occupied. And me, I was caught in the middle, trying to keep both of them from falling apart while pretending I wasn't breaking myself. One night, I couldn't sleep. The house was heavy with silence again, that thick, aching kind of quiet that feels alive. I got up and wandered into the kitchen for water. That's when I noticed the box. It was sitting on the counter, an old wooden one with a brass clasp, the kind that looked like it belonged to another time. Curious, I opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. They were all addressed to one name, Lily. My heart stopped. Each envelope had a different postmark, some faded, some newer. But they were all written in the same handwriting, my mother's. I sat down and began to read. The first letter was dated the year before I was born. My dearest Lily, not a day goes by that I don't think of you. I wonder if you're walking yet, if you have your father's eyes or mine. I want to tell you I love you, even though I'm not allowed to say it out loud. I hope someday, somehow you'll know. The next one was from when I was 5. Lily, you have a sister now. Her name is Emma. She's curious and stubborn just like you were. Sometimes when I look at her, I see you. I hope you're happy, wherever you are. And another from when Lily turned 15. It's your birthday today. I remembered because I never forgot. I made a cake. Your father doesn't know what it's for. I told him it's for a friend's daughter. Maybe that's true. Maybe you'll forgive me one day for pretending. By the time I reached the last letter, one written just 2 months ago, my tears had soaked the paper. They say time heals, but it doesn't. It only hides the wound. I want to tell you the truth before it's too late. If you ever come find me, I'll be here, waiting, hoping, ready to finally be your mother. She'd been writing to Lily all those years, letters she never sent, words she never spoke. I pressed the stack of envelopes to my chest and sat there until dawn. The next morning, I found Mom on the porch. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. I handed her the box. Her eyes widened. "Where did you find that?" she whispered. "In the kitchen," I said softly. "You wrote to her. All these years." She looked away, her throat tightening. I couldn't send them. I didn't even know where she was. But writing them made me feel like she wasn't completely gone. Her hands trembled as she opened the box and touched the top letter. I used to imagine her reading them one day. I thought if she ever came looking for me, maybe I could show her that I never forgot. I hesitated, then said, she should see them. Mom looked at me sharply. "You think she'd want that?" "Yes," I said firmly, "because I think she left believing you never really loved her." Tears welled in Mom's eyes. "But I did. I always did." "Then prove it. I said quietly. Send them to her. That afternoon, we drove into town together. For the first time in days, she changed out of her robe and combed her hair. She looked fragile, but there was a spark of purpose in her movements, like something inside her had shifted. At the post office, she asked for an express parcel envelope. She packed every letter carefully, sealing it with shaking hands. Then she wrote the address, the same one Lily had listed on her visitor form when she arrived. Her hand lingered on the last line before she whispered, "Please reach her this time." When she slid the package across the counter, her breath caught. It was as if she'd been holding that air in for 25 years. Days passed. Then, a week later, a postcard arrived. It was from Lily. No return address, no long message, just one simple line in her neat handwriting. I got the letters. "Thank you, Mom." And below it, in smaller print, "I'll be okay." Mom sat on the couch and cried, the kind of cry that wasn't all sadness anymore. There was grief, yes, but also relief, closure. After that, things started to shift, slowly, quietly, but noticeably. Dad came back into the house. He and Mom began taking walks together again, talking in low, careful voices. I heard him laugh one evening, a small, hesitant laugh, but it was real. And me, I began to see them differently, not as the perfect parents I once believed them to be, but as people, flawed, scared, human people who had made impossible choices. Lily didn't return. But every few weeks, another postcard arrived, from different places, the city, the mountains, the coast. Each one said the same thing. I'm okay. And that was enough. One morning, months later, I was cleaning out the attic when I found an old photo tucked inside a book. It was of Mom, young and bright-eyed, holding a baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. On the back in faded ink were the words, "Lily, my first love." I stood there for a long time staring at it. Then I smiled. Because somehow, despite everything, the lies, the anger, the years of silence, we'd found our way to something honest, something whole. Love, bruised and imperfect as it was, had survived. When the sun set that evening, I sat on the porch, the same porch where Dad and I had once sat in quiet confusion, and watched the sky burn orange over the trees. And for the first time in a long while, the quiet didn't hurt. It felt peaceful, the way silence feels after the storm has passed. It's been almost a year since Lily left that postcard on our doorstep. I still keep it pinned to the refrigerator, the ink slightly smudged from my mother's tears. Sometimes I catch her standing there, looking at it quietly while her hand rests on the edge of the counter as if afraid it might disappear if she blinks. Our lives didn't go back to the way they were before, but somehow they became softer, kinder. Mom started gardening again. She said planting things helps her remember that life keeps moving forward, even after the soil has been turned and broken. Dad built her a small greenhouse in the backyard. Every morning, they water the plants together in silence, sometimes with a quiet joke, sometimes with nothing but the sound of birds and the soft hiss of water. I think they found a new way to love each other, one that wasn't built on hiding the past, but on learning to live with it. As for me, I began to write. It started as a journal, small pieces of what happened, what I felt, what I wanted to remember, but over time, it became something more. A story. Our story. Sometimes I imagine Lily finding it someday, maybe on a bookshelf, maybe online, and realizing that her name was never erased from our family, that even when she wasn't with us, she was still a part of our story, that she always was. Mom doesn't talk much about those early years anymore, but one evening, we were sitting on the porch together watching the fireflies. The air was warm, and she had that faraway look again, the one she gets when she's remembering something she can't quite touch. I asked her, "Do you ever wish you'd told me sooner?" She smiled sadly. "Every day. Then why didn't you?" Her voice trembled when she answered. "Because I didn't want you to see me the way I saw myself. Weak, ashamed. I thought if I buried that part of my life deep enough, I could start over. But shame doesn't die in silence, sweetheart. It grows roots." I reached for her hand. "You're not weak, Mom. You just tried to survive." She turned to me, her eyes shining. So did she. I hope she knows that. Months later, another letter arrived. Not a postcard this time, a real letter, sealed and written in the same careful handwriting I'd come to recognize. Inside was a photo. It was Lily standing in front of a small bookstore somewhere in Oregon, holding a baby boy in her arms. On the back, she'd written, "Mom, Emma, this is Caleb. I thought you'd want to meet your grandson." Mom dropped the photo when she saw it. Her hands flew to her mouth and she made a sound I can't quite describe, something between laughter and sobbing. Dad came running from the kitchen. He picked up the picture, stared at it for a long moment, and then, for the first time since everything happened, he said her name out loud. Lily. There was no anger in his voice anymore, just tenderness, regret, love. He sat beside Mom and pulled her close. She leaned against him, crying softly into his chest. That night, I placed the photo in a frame and set it on the mantel right beside our family portrait. For the first time, it felt complete. It's funny how truth can destroy and heal in equal measure, how something that shatters your world can also become the thing that saves it. If I've learned anything from all of this, it's that love doesn't disappear when people do. It lingers in letters never sent, in words left unspoken, in the quiet hope that one day someone will understand. And sometimes they do. Last week, Mom received a call. It was short, I only heard her side of it, soft and trembling. When she hung up, she turned to me, eyes red but smiling. "She's coming to visit," she whispered. I didn't say anything. I just hugged her. We stood there for a long time, holding each other in that kitchen filled with the smell of coffee and sunlight, the same kitchen where the truth had once exploded like glass. But now, it felt like something new was beginning. The day Lily returned, the sky was the same muted gray it had been that first afternoon she arrived. Only this time there was no tension, no lies, no fear. When she stepped out of the car, she was holding her son, Caleb, rosy-cheeked and curious, clutching her hair with tiny fingers. Mom walked toward her slowly. For a moment, they just stood there, inches apart, the weight of 25 years between them. Then Lily said softly, "Hi, Mom." And just like that, the distance vanished. They fell into each other's arms, crying openly. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just pure, quiet release, the kind that comes from years of aching finally exhaled. Dad stood behind me, his hand resting on my shoulder. "It's about time," he whispered. And I smiled because it was. That night, the four of us sat around the dinner table, Mom, Dad, Lily, and me. Caleb slept in the next room, wrapped in a blanket that used to be mine. We talked about everything and nothing, the past, the future, little things like recipes and favorite books. The room was filled with laughter again, the kind that doesn't hide sorrow but carries it gently. It felt like peace. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that first day she knocked on our door, the day that changed everything. I realize now that she didn't come to destroy us. She came to finish a story that had been left half-written, and in doing so, she gave us all something we didn't know we were missing: truth. Sometimes life hides its truths in the quietest corners, between the things we never say and the moments we pretend not to feel. For years, my mother carried a secret that she thought would destroy us, but in the end, that secret was what brought us closer. It taught me that love isn't always gentle or pure. Sometimes it's heavy, complicated, full of mistakes. Yet it still matters. I used to think that truth was the opposite of love, that if you told it, everything would fall apart. But now I know truth is what allows love to begin again. When I look at my mother now, holding her grandson, her eyes soft, her hands trembling, I see a woman who finally forgave herself. And when I see Lily standing in our doorway again, I see not a stranger, but a part of us that had been missing all along. The past didn't vanish. It still lingers in the old photographs, in the memories we don't always speak of. But now it doesn't hurt the same way. It reminds us who we were and who we chose to become. Sometimes I think about that first day, the knock on the door, the storm that followed, the silence that broke us, and I realize maybe some storms don't come to destroy. Maybe they come to clear the air, to wash away everything that was false so something honest can finally grow. Because at the end of it all, family isn't about perfection. It's about forgiveness. And forgiveness, it's the kind of love that saves everyone. If you were in my place, if the person you thought was your sister turned out to be your mother's secret daughter, would you forgive her? Tell me what your heart would do. And don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the stories that hurt the most are the ones that heal us in the end.